Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. I'll be your host for the next hour. Tonight our guest is Senator-elect George Barker, representing the 39th Senate District. George, we're pleased to have you.
Thank you very much, George.
George is a healthcare expert who, last year Jim Webb won the U.S. Senate for the Democrats. Well, this year it was George Barker who won the Democratic Senate. I know I was at election night headquarters that night. They were furiously phoning your campaign headquarters, asking when you were going to call the race. Knowing you as I know you, you wanted to make sure all those ducks were in a line and that you had absolutely, positively won it. And at that point, you declared victory, and you were the fourth senator to win, and you carried the Virginia Senate for the Democrats, just as Jim Webb did for the U.S. Senate. So I'm really happy to have you tonight.
Thank you very much, George. It certainly was a fun evening election night as we got those results coming in, and we felt confident all along, but we didn't want to call the race until we had enough that it was clear to everybody that we had won it. It was nice to be number 21 and make the Virginia State Senate the first Southern legislative body since Reconstruction to go from Republican to Democrat.
Well, that's
more than 100 years since that had happened in any Southern legislative body. So,
well, that is absolutely great. It was a hard-fought campaign, no doubt. I joked repeatedly. In fact, I joked from the podium on election night how you had to wear track shoes when you went out to go door to door because you literally ran between them. And I am definitely happy for you. I am proud that you were the person who put us over the top. And I look forward to good things out of the Virginia Senate over the next 4 years.
Thank you. I mean, it was fun doing the campaign, but I did it for the difference I think I can make down in Richmond. And I think we do have a tremendous opportunity this year to start moving things in the right direction in the state legislature. And I'm looking forward to it and already been involved in a couple of things, planning sort of some of the things that I think we can take on next year.
For our viewers who don't know a lot about George, he has been an expert in healthcare and healthcare issues and mental health issues for several decades. And for a long time, the legislature, the governors have relied on you for background and information on these issues. Now you're going to be able to implement policy and develop policy and create policy, which I think is great for the voters and residents of the 39th Senate District, but it's also great for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Let's talk a little bit more about the campaign. You had a great team. They worked very hard. I was in and out of your campaign headquarters a number of times, and I don't think I ever walked through the door of that headquarters in Springfield, whether it was a Sunday, a Saturday, or even during the week or in evening hours, where there weren't a whole bunch of people in there working the phones, stuffing envelopes. There was a lot of energy in your campaign, and you should be proud of that.
I'm not only proud of it, I'm very grateful to all the people who put in a tremendous amount of effort to help make this a successful campaign this year. We had great volunteers from the start. Chris Randon, our volunteer coordinator, I got her signed up about a year and a half ago. And I intentionally picked out her because I knew the kind of job that I'd seen her do in other situations. And she was phenomenal in relating to people, making people feel energized, feel great about coming, and staying in contact with people constantly throughout the campaign. And the breadth of support that we had was not only heartwarming, but it was highly effective, and it was a major factor in our victory this year.
Well, Jay O'Brien took a lot of shots at you, but you weathered them. You weathered them well.
We did. I mean, there were a number of attacks that came, particularly late in the campaign, attacks on me, but also attacks on a number of people, groups within the community that I thought were over the line. But in the end, we stuck with our positive message. We made a determination that we were going to run on the issues, we were going to run on our record, on his record, and stick to the facts on things, and not deviate from that. And that's what we did, and it proved to be successful. And we did it in a year in which there were some significant challenges in our district. It wasn't voting Democratic overall, but we had the right positive message that got through to people so that we prevailed on Election Day.
I think you came across as somebody who knew their stuff, so to speak. And I think that made a big difference, and someone who will be a centrist within the Virginia Senate. One of the moves I think that you made that I thought was brilliant was when we all know that the Republicans pulled out the immigration issue out of the hat and used that as an issue this year. The reality of the matter is much of what they discussed and want to do is not possible. Or a lot of what they're talking about is already in federal law or in laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I thought when you put out your piece outlining your views on immigration and cited what in fact was in law already and needed to be enforced appropriately, was a very responsible means of addressing the issue, as opposed to the demagoguery we saw in some of these other races, primarily coming out of the mouths of Republicans. And I mean, it really got to the point of absurdity. And I know quite a bit about immigration. I've written about it before and the like, and familiar with where some of the problems lie, et cetera. And there's no doubt that it's an issue that needs to be addressed, but not in the way it did. But putting all that aside, looking at it strictly from a political view, the Republicans did get some traction out of it. I suspect we're going to see it as an issue next year in the presidential race, and quite possibly in some of the congressional and the U.S. Senate race we'll have here in Virginia. But I applaud you for the position that you took. It was an appropriate position, it was a right position, it was a reasoned position, but still a tough position that recognizes the problem and looks at means of addressing it.
Yeah, there are certainly a lot of things that I think we can and should do at the state and county level that can help address the immigration issue, some directly, some indirectly. Clearly, one of the issues that I saw repeatedly in my campaign was the concern about single-family homes being converted to boarding houses, which is a huge issue in the central Springfield area, is also a significant in parts of Franconia and other parts of the district. And I walked down a lot of those streets because I was out there door knocking every day, running from house to house. And as I went down those streets, what I repeatedly saw was in some of those neighborhoods, every street had one or more instances of houses that had been converted to boarding houses. The county finally in June stepped in and started enforcing its ordinance. It's had an ordinance on the books for years, but had not been aggressively enforcing it. In June, they set up these strike teams with Dana Kaufman helping provide some of the leadership for that, and Jerry Conley instrumental in getting that in place. What we now have are strike teams that are a third one now set up that's going in and investigating the situations. It's making a difference. But there will be legislation that I expect to be carrying this year to help the county be able to enforce that more effectively. And so I'm going to do my part to make sure that the county has all the tools that it needs to address those types of issues. Those are the types of things I think that we should do responsibly, where we're not singling out someone simply because of the way they look or something else, but are addressing something that's a specific issue in a community. That and some of the issues related to people who have been arrested are the types of things that I think we can get passed in Richmond this year that will address the issue, but will not negatively affect those people who are here legally. And I think one of the criteria that we need to apply in deciding what we do and what we don't do is that we don't do anything that's going to harm someone who came here legally, regardless of whether they were born here or whether they moved here. If they're legal, we need to make sure that they're not being singled out in some way.
And we also need to protect that community in terms of public safety. If folks in the ethnic community fear that they will run into a hassle, whether they're legal or, even if they're legal and they're forced to run into a hassle on background checks and all these things that could potentially happen, and some candidates demagogue that far on the issue during the campaign, you're going to run into a situation where that community is going to close up and they're not going to provide very important information to the police relative to crimes and other things that happen in that community, and the police are going to be the ones who are left in the lurch, and all of us will be left in the lurch if that crime is not reported and police aren't able to investigate it, and the courts aren't able to prosecute if there's a need to prosecute.
Right. Trust is essential, and in effect the public has to have trust in the police, in our county officials, in terms of how things will be handled, and that they will not suffer as a result of doing the right thing. And we need to make sure we maintain those types of relationships so that the public, regardless of who they are or where they came from, communicates effectively with the police so that we have a good system that is effective in maintaining the safety of our communities for all of us.
Well, back to the campaign and talking with some of your people over the course of the campaign, they had a pretty good feel. I don't think anybody realized the Republicans would turn out as heavily as they did, but they had a pretty good feel as to where your votes were going to come from. Obviously, you were on the ground getting that feel every day, and all the high tech and other things that are done behind the scenes in a campaign today. And afterwards, when I looked at how you fared across the district, you folks had a pretty good handle on what you were going to do.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that, part of the reason we had such a good feel for things is that was my campaigning door to door. This year, starting back last winter, I was out there essentially every day, regardless of weather conditions, and hit over 17,000 houses this year. And in some of those areas, in places like Fairfax Station and Prince William, where you have 5-acre zoning, it's a long way between some of those houses. So I did get in good shape. I lost a little bit of weight. I went through 4 pairs of shoes and under number 5, but it was worth it from a couple of standpoints. One, obviously, was worth it in terms of electoral success, but it also, I think, prepared me much better to go down to Richmond this year and represent the people of the 39th District, because I got a feel for not only sort of what the big picture issues are, but what people care about on the local things. What are the things going on in their communities, and how can I, as an elected official, do things that can make their lives better? Regardless of whether it's some piece of legislation or working with others in terms of solving a problem in their community. And that type of experience and knowledge is invaluable. A lot of the big picture stuff I knew about last January. The little things in terms of communities I didn't know as much about, and I'm much better prepared to represent the people effectively, now that I've been to all those houses.
Former House Speaker Tip O'Neill said all politics is local.
Well, there's an element to that. I mean, it was somewhat local, and there were also other trends, and you got to pay attention to things, because some of it is the local issue. But some of it also is sort of what are the big picture issues that go really beyond what's happening in the local community. And I think it's our responsibility as legislators to understand both pieces of it. It's not all local, it's not all national, but it's a mix of the types of things that are relevant to people, that are significant, and we need to make sure that we're representing the people and doing the right thing for them.
Well, I think you will. We have about a minute before we break. Why don't you spend 30 or 40 seconds talking directly to the voters?
I'd be happy to. I appreciate this opportunity, George. I tremendously appreciated the opportunity this year to go out to the public, to go door to door, and to meet so many of you and talk with you one-on-one. As I said earlier, it's something that I think was good for the campaign, but it's also tremendously helpful in helping me understand the issues. And I thank you for that opportunity. It was when I got to spend time with voters that I got a good feel for things, and they also got a good feel for me. And I think both those aspects were very encouraging. I spent a lot of time talking to people, and I didn't just go knock on the door and say, vote for me. Every house I went to, I said, what are the issues you want me to tackle when I get down to Richmond? And that's where I got a feel for what was happening at that local level. So I thank you for the opportunity to get to meet you this year. I look forward to representing you. I want to stay in touch as much as I possibly can. We'll be doing town meetings, all kinds of other things. We'll send out newsletters, provide you opportunity for input. I want to hear from you so that I can be the most effective representative you can have.
We will be back in 2 minutes. Please hang in there, and we'll be taking your calls.
Jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up. If you give me a fish...
If you give someone a fish...
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey,
Mr. Studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, Mr. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
I can hear it.
Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby. Come on. Line it up, baby.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. I'm your host. We're joined today by Senator-elect George Barker, 39th Senate District. And we've spent a good 15 minutes talking about the campaign. George, let's start looking at where the Senate's going to go. The Senate has proven and proved during the last session that compared to the Republican House, even the Republican Senate was more of a moderate body. But some of those moderates have left and been replaced by folks who maybe are a little bit more to the right in some of those seats. And we won a couple of those seats as well, where more conservative folks, I don't even want to call them conservative because that's not a dirty word in Virginia. I want to call them obstructionist in some instances, certainly in the House. And the House hasn't changed too much. We won 3 or 4, I think 4 seats we ended up winning.
Right.
It makes a little bit of difference, but not enough. You folks are going to be like the kid who had his finger in the dam fighting this groundswell. The House has to get reelected in 2 years, so they're definitely going to want to be pushing their agenda and trying to tie their agenda into the Republican who will presumably be running for the United States Senate against Mark Warner. But my opinion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to see a centrist, moderate, responsible, and reasonable Senate under presumably Dick Saslaw's leadership. We expect that he will. I mean, it's no secret that we expect he will be elected Senate Majority Leader when the Senate convenes in January. So how do you see the makeup of the Senate this time around?
Well, in some respects, the makeup of the Senate is not a whole lot different from the last Senate.
Mm-hmm.
The last Senate, we had 23 Republicans and 17 Democrats. Now we have 21 Democrats and 19 Republicans. But in terms of the general approach to the problems, I don't think it's that much difference. And in reality, what we had the last 4 years was a Senate that, by and large, was a three-party Senate. There were the last 3 years, there have been 17 Democrats, 17 sort of moderate centrist Republicans that worked effectively with Democrats, and 6 Republicans who were on the far right who did not work well not only with Democrats, but did not work well with the mainstream Republicans. And so what you really had was a bipartisan approach from 34 out of the 40 senators that worked effectively on trying to solve the problems. We still have that bipartisan approach. And just because Democrats now are numerically superior doesn't mean that the general philosophy is going to change in any substantial way. We're going to have a Senate that is going to be governed by and large by centrist policies, Democrats and Republicans working together effectively, I think, in most respects with Governor Kane to get things done and do responsible policies that will not harm Virginia in the long run. What I'm hopeful is that we'll get some progress and some accommodation on the House side now. The House, as you said, has 4 more Democrats than it had. Democrats just in 2002 had 33. There were only 33 Democrats in the House of Delegates. Now there are 44. It's not all the way to 50, but what you have is enough Democrats that if there are some of the moderate Republicans in the House start working with Democrats, we can get some compromise and consensus on things and really move Virginia forward to address some of our problems.
I want to get back to this. I want to talk, you just met in Southwest, had a couple of different meetings. I want to talk about that a little bit. But we have a phone call from Mike from Centerville. Mike, are you there?
Is public access to the HOV hot lanes. We can't see the contracts. Are you going to push to make those contracts visible to everybody so we know what the state signed away?
You're talking about the hot lanes contracts that have been set up. We can't
Hot lanes and Metro.
Hot lanes and Metro.
To Dulles.
Yes, I think over time there will be changes to those to provide much more public scrutiny on those contracts. How much we can do retrospectively, I'm not sure. But clearly that's an issue that has certainly gotten a lot of attention within the past 2 years, partly because of the situation regarding the Metro project out to Dulles, but also the 2 major hot lanes projects that are now pending. The one that has been approved in a preliminary stage for the Beltway and the one that's proposed at this point for the 95-395 corridor. I think there will be some changes over time. I hope to be involved in that process. I have for the last 6 years, 6.5 years, been chair of Fairfax County's Transportation Commission. I understand some of the issues, and I expect to be heavily involved in discussion of those types of transportation concerns.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, George. I just want to remind our viewers that if you want to call us, you can call us at 571-749-1166, and we welcome your calls. Let's go back to the Senate. You just came back from a couple of meetings. The Post talked about them a little bit. You met with the Finance Committee members. Was that the entire Senate, or was that basically Finance Committee members and new senators? What was
it was a 2-day, the annual 2-day retreat of the Senate Finance Committee to go over issues leading up to the session starting in January. It's a thing they've been doing for years. And they invite all Senate members, and the overwhelming majority of the Senate members were there. Probably 35, 36 out of the 40 senators were there for at least part of the time. It's a great opportunity for all senators to get a briefing and understanding sort of where things stand on the budget, to have an opportunity to discuss with other senators, with staff, with people from the governor's office, what are the issues and how can we best address these types of issues. So it was, I think, a very positive session there. It was one where I sort of had made my first transition from being one who's been to a lot of those types of Senate Finance Committee meetings in the past, but always were sitting out in the audience. Now I was at the big table, and there were a couple of people who said, it was interesting to see me make that switch. So, but I do have that type of background where I can bring a lot of the expertise that I've gained over the years in working with the Senate Finance Committee and helping us begin to address some of these issues, and I look forward to an opportunity to provide input and to help move Virginia forward.
Were there anything that opened your eyes a little bit, anything that surprised you based on what came out of that meeting? That you want to talk about, of course. I understand.
No, there was nothing that surprised me. I've been involved in those types of finance issues at the state level for too long to be surprised by things. What was encouraging was, I think, the collegial spirit and attitude of the members of the Senate to try to resolve these problems. We do have some significant issues that relates to the budget for next year. We have some potential long-term things depending upon whether the economy goes into a recession, and we did have an economist who came and said she thought we are already in a recession, and that this quarter that we're in right now will be the first of at least 2 quarters where we'll have negative national growth, and that we need to be prepared for dealing with it. Part of what was encouraging was that the Senate, under the bipartisan leadership that it's had over the last several years, took steps in the last few years to make sure that we were not behind the box when this type of turnaround came. Because we go through cycles all the time where the economy goes good for a while, it turns a little south for a little while. What you got to do is be careful when revenues are up that you not lock in those types of expenditures that are going to get you in trouble later. And the Senate did hold the line on a number of things that the House members had pushed for in the last couple of budget cycles, and said we're going to use these surpluses for things like capital projects that don't lock us into expenditures that are going to be very difficult to meet in the long run. That proved to be the correct policy and approach. It's a type of perspective I've always had on things, and it's a type of perspective I will bring to the Senate.
Obviously, the budget shortfall issue is on a lot of people's mind. It's something you're going to have to deal with when you get down there. Before the show, we talked about some of the key issues there. And we've got about 3 minutes for the break, and I'd like to run through a few of them and have you give our viewers a feel for what they are and where you see we're going to be going. And we'll go into the next segment on this as well. But obviously, mental health is an area you've been heavily involved in. It's front burner now because of the tragedy at Virginia Tech and the like, and there's been commissions and there's talk of a lot of legislation. Where do you think we need to go on the mental health issue? We certainly have some deficiencies now. How do we address them, particularly at a time when we're faced with vegetarian.
Well, I could take the next 30 minutes talking about this subject because it's something that is vitally important, something I've been heavily involved in planning for here in Northern Virginia for the last 5 years. There are things that we need to do. We have some significant issues, and you talked about the incident at Virginia Tech, the killings at Virginia Tech last year. Well, in 2006, we also had the 2 police officers at the Sully Fire Station.
Correct.
Both of the killers were from Northern Virginia, from Fairfax County, and both of them had significant mental health issues. What we need to do is have our mental health system be in a position where it can be responsive in those types of situations and help make sure that people get care. What we don't need are situations where someone who has a chronic mental health problem finally is ready to accept treatment and instead gets put on a waiting list. That's when you have missed opportunities. And how many missed opportunities there were and what types of different outcome, whether we would have had a different outcome if those opportunities had not been missed in those situations, who can say? But there's certainly the potential for making things much less risky for the public at large, as well as much better for those individuals and their families if we're helping them get treatment when they need it. We have some critical issues here in Northern Virginia. We've had 3 hospitals close their psychiatric units in recent years. Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute, our only state facility, is constantly full. We can't accommodate all the people who need care there, and so we end up trying to work things with the community hospitals and with others. So there are a whole host of issues that need to be addressed. On the other hand, we have some positive things that are starting to happen. We've gotten some state funding for crisis stabilization beds, and I think one of the things that will be positive that will come out of the tragedy at Virginia Tech is that we will get more crisis stabilization beds. These are beds that are sort of in between being in the community and being in a mental health hospital. That's about $200 a day less expensive. It can help a lot of people and can help deal with problems when they're having a critical issue, help get them stabilized and get back into the community. It's something that's worked very effectively here in Fairfax County, and we need to build upon that elsewhere as well. We're also got some money here to be able to deal with mental health services for the elderly. Historically and up until now, if you're over the age of 64 and you need to go in the state mental health system, you don't go to Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute. It only takes care of you up to age 64. If you're 65 or older, you go downstate, over 100 miles away, and you're out of your community, you're not maintaining the same type of communication with your family and friends and things like that that are important. We got some money to help begin to provide some services there. So we need to do those types of things on a broad scale basis, as well as addressing some of the issues regarding commitment and detention that can help make us be much more effective in providing mental health services, do a much better job for those people who have these chronic mental health problems, but also make us a better community overall.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask George, where's the money coming from? Steve.
Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures, lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events,
entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is,
you can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My guest is Senator-elect George Barker from the 39th Senate District. We're glad to have him today. We've covered a lot of ground, but I'm going to go back to the mental health issue. What we're talking about is going to cost a lot of money. And with the subprime mortgage issues, the economy slowing down, even Starbucks is not selling as much coffee. So we're going into an area where we're clearly going to have to do some belt tightening. That's not to say there's not some fat that can be cut in some areas within some of the Commonwealth programs. I'm not an expert at that. I wouldn't even want to suggest where to start. But are we going to have the money to affect change in some of these mental health areas?
No, we're not going to have the money to do all that we really want to do and that we really should be doing. Part of what we're going to have to do on some of the initiatives is phase things in gradually, and it will take a number of years to be able to implement the types of programs that can make us most effective in providing services. So we're going to have to, do it the right way and see what works, see what's most effective. In some instances where we know things are effective, like the crisis stabilization beds that have been extraordinarily good here in Fairfax County, we will add beds, but we won't add as many beds at one time as would be desirable. And we'll have to do it in a way in which we can afford it. And during tight times like this, like we have now economically, we're going to have to be cautious and do it in a deliberate manner. But in the end, I think we can get there. And what we need to do is keep focused on the long-term issues and where we want to be long-term, regardless of whether it's mental health or education or transportation, and move in the right direction. And that's what I think we can do.
Folks, this is what I talk about, the Senate becoming a true, responsible, and reasonable voice here in the Commonwealth. Telling it like it is rather than making promises that can't be kept.
It would be nice to be able to to promise everything and be able to deliver next year, but we're not going to.
Well,
and so we need to have the right strategy and the right approach that moves us in a positive direction next year, but also has a clear goal as to where we want to get within a few short years.
Another one of the issues is, I guess, our prisons are bursting at the seams, and some of them are in need of repair or replacement. And I know that there's been some discussion relative to prison construction and the like. Where do we have to go there? What are you folks looking at? Or what are you looking at this point until you obviously get seated in January?
Well, that was one of the more sobering aspects of the presentations and discussions we had at the Senate Finance Committee. We have 5 new prisons that are under planning and development now. We have a 6th prison that is in the budget for planning to develop sometime after 2011. But we have 5 more prisons that we need to build on top of that. So there is a huge increase in prison construction that's coming forward if we're going to be able to respond to the number of prisoners that we expect to have. And prisons are not cheap. It costs $100 million or a little bit more to be able to build in the first place, as well as significant cost, over $25,000 per prisoner to operate. So it's something that is going to have to be developed over time. And right now there's not money in the budget to be in the out years to be able to do that. So that's one of the struggles and strategies that we're going to have to develop here, is how we begin to address that in a constructive and positive way that moves us towards resolving that problem and making sure we have enough capacity. Right now we have actually over 1,000 prisoners in our prisons who are not Virginia prisoners. We contract and receive money from other states and from the feds for holding a number of prisoners. But most of these prisons are about 1,000, so that number is quickly going to diminish, and over the next few years we will be in a position where we will not have enough prison capacity if we don't build additional prisons based upon what the projections are.
Is there any other possibility that the feds will kick in any money? Are there any programs where, given where the state and municipalities are being forced to shoulder some of the burden on housing prisoners, federal prisoners, for whatever reason, is there any potential for any, I guess, the feds aren't in any better shape than the Commonwealth is. They're probably in worse shape.
Nothing significant that we expect there in terms of federal support. I mean, we do receive a small amount of federal dollars for some of the prisoners that we do house, but basically it's some of the immigrants that are housed now. But there's not really a long-term program that's going to provide a significant amount of money from the federal government to either develop or operate prisons that are other than for state prisoners, other than for federal prisoners.
We have a call from Rima from Fairfax. Rima, are you there? Well, I guess we lost her. She didn't want to wait. Rima, call us back if you want to talk. We'll take your call. Let's go right into re-benchmarking for education.
Yes.
George, I don't quite understand that, and I suspect a lot of our viewers may not fully understand what that means. Can you describe it for us and tell us what needs to be done?
Under state law, the state, through the Board of Education, periodically updates what it expects the cost of education to be for a student in Virginia. And then they calculate how much of that money is to come from the state and how much is to come from the local counties and cities to pay for the cost of that education. For the next biennium, for the 2-year budget period that's starting July of next year, the expectation is it's going to cost about $1.2 billion to be able to do that re-benchmarking. What that re-benchmarking will do is provide additional money to most localities. So that, for example, Fairfax County and Fairfax City will receive additional money to help cover part of the cost of educating our local students. Still, the majority of our money will come from local taxpayers, but there should be more state money coming. Part of our challenge is to figure out a way to be able to cover those costs for next year, given the tight budget situation at the state level.
The Fairfax, there's been the complaint for years that we pay a lot more than we get in return. And, well, quite frankly, Fairfax is the wealthiest or second wealthiest jurisdiction in Virginia. I think maybe Fauquier may be ahead of us in terms of per capita income now. And certainly we have a responsibility statewide to make sure that children throughout the state get a quality education. But looking at some of the recent reports and knowing and hearing what soon-to-be Majority Leader Senator Dick Saslaw said, that he thinks that there'll be a bit more of an urban tilt to some of the focus on the Senate. I was going through a list of Northern Virginia senators, and it looks like Dick Saslaw, Chuck Colgan, Janet Howell, Mary Margaret Whipple, Patsy Ticer, and Toddy Puller may all be in line for committee chairmanships under Democratic control. That's a lot of power all of a sudden being transferred into the hands of Northern Virginians. And we had the Republicans had Vince Callahan, who was a relatively moderate member of the House. He's now retired and is replaced by Margie Vanderhei up there. But it's unclear whether we'll see, too many Northern Virginians occupying positions of leadership within the entire House of Delegates. So that leadership, a lot of it's going to have to come out of the Senate. How do you see that focus going? Certainly, I think it's got to benefit us, because I know that Fairfax County and some of the other localities are in regular communications with their delegation in Richmond, and they put a number of people down there for the session that work hand in hand with our delegation down there. Do you think we're going to reap some benefits out of that?
I'm looking forward to how we're going to operate down there. Exactly in terms of benefits, I'm not quite sure what will transpire there. What I think is positive is that there are 6 senators that you listed there. Conceivably, all 6 would be committee chair. There may be as few as 3. So somewhere between 3 and 6 of the 11 committees in the Senate are likely to be chaired by Northern Virginians. What I think is important is the quality of those people. And what I've seen is that we have people who are established senators from Northern Virginia who have worked effectively with Republicans to get things done and worked effectively with legislators from downstate. We're not going to go down there and run a Northern Virginia operation. First of all, we couldn't do that. We don't have the numbers to do that. But secondly, it's not the type of responsibility we have. We have a responsibility to provide effective government for the whole state.
Correct.
And we can do that most effectively if we are working well with people, with Republicans and Democrats, with people from downstate and from Northern Virginia. The type of people that you're talking about there are all people who provided good, effective leadership, even when they were in the minority, and I think clearly will do so now in the majority, some of them as committee chairs. I look forward to working with these senators. Part of what I found very encouraging about the meetings I had last week, I've known a lot of these people over many, many years, But sort of being on the inside now, on the inside, the perspective is still the same. They want to do the right things for Virginia, and I'm looking forward to working with them to get that accomplished. It's not Northern Virginia versus downstate Virginia. It's not Democrat versus Republican. We're all Virginians, and we need to make sure we do the right thing for all Virginians.
I think I'm glad to hear you say that, because certainly we want to get a fair share of the pie up here, but we also have to consider our relations with the rest of our fellow citizens across the Commonwealth, because there certainly is sentiment within the House of Delegates, almost an anti-Northern Virginia sentiment that exists, and you know, we have to play fair to show them that they have to play fair as well.
Yeah, I think a good example. I mean, it's in the interest of people from Southside Virginia for us in Northern Virginia to solve our transportation problems. We're the economic engine of the state. We're leading the economic development nationally in a lot of respects. We're providing a lot of the revenue, the jobs, the good incomes, those types of things that benefit all of Virginia, the tax revenues. It's in the interest of the people in Southside Virginia that our problems are solved so that that doesn't get choked off. On the other hand, it's in our interest in Northern Virginia that we get economic development in Southwest Virginia, in areas where there is substantial unemployment. It benefits the whole state if we have an economy that's working well statewide, rather than a strong economy in Northern Virginia and a very weak economy in other parts of the state. We need to have Northern Virginia and the southern part of the state working together to solve both of these types of problems, the economic development issues in Southside and Southwest, and the transportation issues up here in Northern Virginia that will benefit people throughout the Commonwealth.
You talked about your meetings, and you certainly had the Senate Finance Committee meeting in Blacksburg. But then you had another meeting that was more about, I think, the strategy among the Democrats. I saw it in an article in the Post about it. And I'm certainly not going to ask for the trade secrets, but what can you tell us about that meeting? I mean, what was the atmosphere? I mean, are your colleagues ready to rock and roll? I'm sure Dick Saslaw is ready to lead. He's worked very hard from his perch to provide as much assistance as he could to the Senate candidates this time around. And what's the sentiment? What's the scuttlebutt? What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you a few things about our perspective as Senate Democrats. And there were 21 Democrats in the Senate now, and we did get together after the Senate Finance Committee retreat and meet just on our own to talk about things. One thing that was very nice was I was a highly popular person. As the person who made it 21 Democrats, where we have the majority, I was rather well received there. So that was fun. And people were excited to be in a position to help move legislation forward, to help address some of the budget issues. What I found encouraging and particularly heartwarming was people want to work together with Governor Kane to really get some things done. But we wanted to do it in a way that we're working with Republicans. I heard nothing in the entire time that indicated that this is going to be a partisan approach. Just as Republicans have worked well with Democrats in the Senate for many years, the same is going to be true now. And we're going to work closely with them. Dick Saslaw has made that quite clear, that we're going to work very effectively with the Republicans, and they're going to have a significant voice in things, and it's going to be a partnership to get some things done, rather than us as Democrats trying to ram through our ideas on things. We are going to be most effective when we work together on things, upstate, downstate, Democrats and Republicans, to resolve the issues.
The United States Senate has always had a reputation for collegiality, although that's been strained a little bit over the last couple of years. And many of our state senates, including the state senate here in the Commonwealth, have a similar reputation. And I'm glad to hear that you want to continue that. It's always been sort of known as the upper house in the old days.
It has been that way, and I can talk about that a little bit more when we come back from the break. So.
We'll see you in 2 minutes. Hang in there.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors,
your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures,
lifestyles,
art,
sports,
music,
events,
entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras,
audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm your host, George Burke. We're joined tonight with Senator-elect George Barker from the 39th Senate District. We want to go back to talking about the Senate and collegiality and their strategy session a little bit, but first we want to hear from Bill from Burke. Bill, you there? I guess we don't have him.
Hello?
Oh, Bill?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir. How's it going?
Good, good. What's your question?
Yes, sir. Well, I would like to congratulate Senator Barker on his election.
Thank you.
But also, what you're going to do about this tax for getting a speeding ticket. It's crazy.
The so-called abuser fees.
Yes.
That are tied into the transportation bill.
Yes, exactly.
George?
I'd be happy to. It was obviously a significant issue in my campaign. I felt that those were bad policy from the beginning, and certainly I think the public has rallied around that cause. There will be a bill introduced to repeal and refund. Will be the way we're approaching it, to repeal that portion of the transportation bill that was adopted last year and to refund any fees that have been paid by people thus far, so that people who have suffered as a result of this will in effect be recompensated. That's the approach that we're going to try to take on that. Whether we're successful or not, we'll see, but that's the approach I think that we're going to be pushing from the Senate side this year.
I know there's a lot of different pressures on the Senate relative to this stuff, and that one of the things the Republicans did this time is they didn't, even though they passed what are basically taxes, fees or taxes, they didn't want to utter the word tax and the like. But there's certainly a group of people out there who suggest the fairest way, and it's still a user fee, because it's only placed on people who drive, and it's placed on all people who drive, whether they're truckers, whether they're tourists, or whether they're drivers in Virginia, and it's not a penalty, is the idea of bumping the gas tax up a couple of cents. I mean, the price of gasoline now, which we have no control over, you're not going to notice 2 cents. It jumps 6, 8, 10 cents, sometimes jumps back 6, 5 cents, and now in most places we're over, certainly in Fairfax, there's only a handful of gas stations that are anywhere below $3. It's $3, $3.06. I saw a couple that were $2.96, $2.98. It's a little less expensive in Prince William by about another dime to the last time I was there. Do you think that the idea of a gas tax increase, which hasn't been done in years and years, my understanding is that dead on arrival, particularly in the House of Delegates?
I don't know whether it'll be dead on arrival in the House of Delegates or not. We'll see. But I think what we need to do is really develop a long-term approach to transportation that provides us adequate funding. And if we develop a plan that says, here's what we need in terms of addressing our transportation funding shortfall, and we do have a huge shortfall, figure out what projects we're going to be able to address with that, and then start to figure out how we fund that. My perspective all along, and I was attacked in this heavily during my campaign, is that we need to put a wide variety of issues on the table to be able to figure out how do we do it. That includes, can we shift monies from other programs in state government? Can we do the types of long-term funding strategies that deal with that? Can we use surpluses when we have it, as was done this past year on some of the transportation things and also on some of the capital projects? Do we need new taxes on some of these types of things? All of those things need to be considered. If we start taking options off the table, all we can guarantee is that we won't end up coming up with enough funding to be able to solve our problem. The people of Northern Virginia, I think, very clearly want our transportation problem solved. We're never going to make things perfect. We have the issues are too big, and the number of people and vehicles is too great. But we can make things a lot better. One of the things that I got great resonance on this campaign was talking about extending Metro Rail down into Prince William County. Taking the Blue Line, which stops in Springfield now, and Franconia Springfield stop, and running it down to the Potomac Mills area in Prince William. Taking the Orange Line, which stops in Vienna now, and running it out to the Manassas area. We got those approved, and they're on the new comprehensive plan for the Fairfax County last year in 2006 by the Board of Supervisors, the Transportation Commission that I've chaired for many years. We've got those things on the plan now. What we need to do is figure out how we're going to fund them and start to move those types of projects forward. They can make a big difference long term in our transportation situation. Otherwise, we're just going to have gridlock continuing to get worse and worse and worse. And that's something that is, I think, unacceptable from a perspective of a legislator, and I think unacceptable from the perspective of the voting public as well.
It's an economic issue. It's a quality of life issue.
It's both. I mean, it's clearly a quality of life issue. I talked to people this year in Prince William County who retired 10 years earlier than they probably would have, simply because they got tired of the traffic situation and the commuting problems they had. And they said, here I retired and figure all my problems would be over. Now I still feel I can only go out between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Otherwise, I'm still stuck in all that traffic. So it's something that affects quality of life for everybody here. But it also is an economic issue. We've already had companies that have offices and operations here in Northern Virginia and have operations elsewhere that would have expanded in Northern Virginia if it weren't for the transportation situation. And that's what led them to expand elsewhere. So we're losing good, high-paying, quality jobs, the types of jobs that have made Northern Virginia the tremendous place it is, with very high median income, with a strong quality of life, where we have good schools and the types of communities that we want. We need to make sure we keep those types of things rather than risk losing them by not addressing our problems.
Hear, hear. Bill, I understand you have another question. Are you still with us? Guess not. If he comes back, if he calls back, we'll take it. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Start from the beginning.
Oh, sorry. That was it. I was interested in current mass transit policies. You covered it very well. Thank you very much.
I guess we anticipated your question, so.
I appreciate that.
Certainly.
Well, you know, George may be embarrassed by this, but I think George has proved himself to be a good politician in this last campaign, but George is also very much what we would call in politics a policy wonk. He knows his stuff. And he's been dealing with this stuff for a long time, and we certainly look forward to him there. Let's we've got a few minutes left, and there's three things I still want to cover. One is the whole, we were talking about collegiality.
Yes.
You think the Senate's going to be able to work together, but I suspect we're going to end up having the roadblocks in the House.
We may, and it remains to be seen how the House operates and whether they're willing to work with us on trying to solve problems. In the last several years, we've had people like Senator Chichester from the Fredericksburg area, a Republican who ran the Senate Finance Committee, who understood the details of a lot of these issues, just like you referred to me in terms of things, but who also knew how to work with people to get things done, and worked very effectively with both the Republicans in the Senate as well as the Democrats. I look forward to Dick Saslaw providing that similar type of leadership as majority leader here. Chuck Colgan from Northern Virginia, from Prince William County, is going to be chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Chuck has worked very effectively with Republicans over the years. He and John Chichester worked hand in hand on many issues. We're going to have the type of leaders in the Senate that I think are going to work effectively with Republicans to bring us together to help solve these problems and find consensus and compromise that will make good policy and will get things done for the people of Virginia. And I look forward to being part of that. It's fun to be in that type of body where we're solving problems rather than fighting with each other constantly.
Well, I'm glad you have an open mind relative to House of Delegates, but I just don't have a lot of faith in those.
We'll see. We'll see.
Crowd. Let's talk about the pre-K initiative. It's one of the things that the governor feels strongly about. You know, the reality of the matter is we have a lot of pre-K up here in Northern Virginia, but much of the rest of the Commonwealth does not. And I think there's been enough studies that show a twofold thing. One, that often mothers can go back to work if they choose to do so, and more importantly, it starts providing real building blocks for our students at an early age, and ultimately prepares them better to deal with some of the complex subjects they have to deal with now as they move through the school system if we want to continue to compete globally. That's going to be relatively expensive. We've got a lot of money issues on the table. How do we do it?
We do it by targeting. We already actually have a modest pre-K program. Very few people are aware that we do, but we do. With state funding up to about $5,700 per year per student for 4-year-olds. It's based upon the number of children of that age who would meet the criteria for free lunch, below 133% of poverty. And there's money available for each jurisdiction. Interestingly, although in aggregate you're correct that we have a lot of pre-K up here in Northern Virginia, for the lower income population we don't do as well. Fairfax County uses less than half of the funding that's available to it. Prince William County uses almost no funding. Manassas has no program at all. We happen to be the area where there's the least utilization of available state funding for pre-K programs. It's driven those decisions not to have that provide as much capacity there, provide service to as many kids, is driven partly by the problems we have with schools. So when you have overcrowding in schools, it makes it more difficult to be able to introduce these new programs. We also have a situation in Fairfax County where there are a large number of elementary schools that still don't have all-day kindergarten. In most of the rest of the state, every school has all-day kindergarten. So partly because of the capacity issues within our buildings, we need to catch up in some of these areas. What is encouraging about what's being looked at in terms of the pre-K program is the results from what the state has done thus far have been extraordinarily strong. Those kids who are in the pre-K program, by the time they're in 3rd grade, are far, far more likely to pass those reading tests and those types of things. So just providing that assistance, particularly to the kids at the lower end of the economic scale, has been extraordinarily beneficial in helping those kids do well by the time they got to 3rd grade. It has lasting and positive impact. It's something we need to take advantage of. We actually are very good ranked in terms of our educational system with 2 exceptions, and that's pre-K and kindergarten, and we need to do better in those respects.
Well, we're drawing to a close here. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. I know you've all of a sudden have a lot of different responsibilities that you have to deal with, and I appreciate you coming, particularly just coming on the heels of having to hold those meetings in Blacksburg and Stanton. I look forward to following your progress in the Senate and following the progress of soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Dick Saslow. I think George is going to be a very accessible senator, and I expect a lot of you viewers to call him, write him, and let him know what you think. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.